Well, it is 11:04, I believe, so I will go ahead and get us started. Welcome to our webinar about data-informed acquisition and retention strategies. Really excited to talk to you all today. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. As you can see on the next slide here, I am Maureen McNally. My pronouns are she, her, excuse me. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Mission Wired, and I work out of our New York City office, and I have the absolute joy of working with Becca day in and day out at Mission Wired. And so I'll pass it over to you, Becca, to introduce yourself.
And I'm Becca Blader. I'm the Digital Program Manager at Make-A-Wish. I primarily oversee our paid advertising programs, but also do help out on email. We are a totally remote organization, so I am based out of Virginia. So to kick us off, Make-A-Wish was facing a lot of challenges coming out of the COVID fundraising period. We had, like a lot of people, seen major growth during that time. And while we were still seeing some growth, it had really slowed significantly. We knew that we had a ton of potential to grow some of our channels, especially like ads and email, but we were really struggling to find the right balance between retention and acquisition. And like a lot of organizations over the last couple of years, we have really, really big revenue goals and have been asked to do more with less. In the past, our acquisition strategies had been kind of passive and primarily focused on sustainer growth. And sustainers are great and really important, but that revenue, as we all know, takes longer to realize. So we really needed to start finding some ways that we could reach more immediate revenue goals without sacrificing long-term growth. This led us to some questions around investment and prioritization. We had been finding ourselves stopping and starting acquisition strategies and stopping and starting different growth strategies. And that made it really difficult to see what was and wasn't working, and which in turn only made it more difficult to figure out where the right place to invest was. So as we started approaching this with Mission Wired, we really focused in on data-driven media planning. We refreshed, I think, is a light word for what we did. We totally overhauled our paid media and also our email creative campaigns. And we honed in on fixed cost investments and developing a really strong retention and cultivation plan for our donors. And since we started doing this, we have seen some really incredible results. We've seen an 80% growth in our active list size, which has been just an absolute game changer for our fundraising. And we also saw really significant revenue growth. In email alone, this is my favorite chart probably in the entire world. But in email alone, we had a 55% increase in revenue year over year. We also saw the overall cost of our donation cost per donation come down 72%. And we've seen renewed success and efficiency in channels like Facebook and Instagram that frankly, I thought were sort of lost to us after the iOS changes a few years ago. This has also allowed us to identify some specific audiences and tactics that make sense for the acquisition investment. The consistency that this has built for our program is allowing us to measure this in a way that we haven't been able to in the past, and is helping to not only inform our strategy for investment, but also make the case for additional investment within the organization. So when we started working with Mission Wired, we kind of took it back to basics and thought about these 4 questions here. The first, what motivates this specific nonprofit's audience to give? We know that our stories and our wish families are really the core of what we do. So for us, that was a really easy question to answer. We also started looking into the categories of donors that we had, and more specifically, who was missing. We also started looking at strategies that support sustainable audience growth, and we're really focusing on our cultivation strategies for our existing donors. So like I said, we totally revamped all of our digital creative. At Make-A-Wish, we know that the stories about our Wish kids and their families are probably the most powerful fundraising tools that we have. So it was really important to us to keep those stories at the heart of how we engage with all of our donor and prospect groups. Introducing the fixed cost acquisition model allowed us to budget for acquisition more effectively, and it also helps us to measure the results of this investment. And we also started rethinking our strategy around cultivation and retention strategy. We have seen such fantastic growth, and we know that it's not going to pay off in the long term if we don't retain these donors. So one of the things that we introduced was the Sign the Card ads, where we asked supporters to sign a card to support Wish kids or parents or volunteers. This was a totally new tactic for us, and we've seen it work really well. These ads capture a user's email address and then brings them through a journey that is engaging, and provides them a lot of great educational content about the Make-A-Wish mission and before asking them for a gift. We use these ads in both acquisition and retargeting and have found them to be super effective. Um, the creative strategy behind these, I think, is part of why they work so well. What you're seeing on the screen here is the graphic and copy that drove the most donations, and it gave us some really great insights about what elements are working for these ads. So we found that having really strong eye contact in the photos, having that progress bar that shows that we still have some work to do, and the medium length copy make a really big difference. Another thing that we found really effective was the very clear CTA on that really large clickable button. So across all audiences, this ad variant drove above average donations for us online. And we saw our cost per donation drop by 46%, which meant that we were able to reach more people with the budget that we had.
Perfect. And I think one of the ways that Make-A-Wish was able to drive a lot of the success over the past year was not just the copy, though I think that's a huge piece of it, but also expanding the audience that they were able to speak to. And so I think the two really go hand in hand. Is, you need the right acquisition strategy and the right communication strategy and engagement strategy to ensure that you're able to drive the results that Becca spoke about at the beginning. And so one way that we did that was leaning pretty heavily into the digital co-op. Right now, the digital co-op has just over 250 members, 150 million unique email addresses. That is a massive number. The best way to think about that is that it's 1 out of every 3 people in the United States. Their email address is already in the co-op. And from the names that have been acquired through the co-op, not just for Make-A-Wish, but from all of the organizations, they have raised over $133 million, which is really incredible, especially when you think about the fact that the co-op was only created in 2020, as we were really looking at the offline channels and thinking about what are other acquisition strategies that are working in the offline channels that we can bring online. And so that's really when the digital co-op was born in 2020. So on this next slide here, you can see a challenge of how do you know fixed costs will be a fixed cost list, will be engaged, active, and responsive to your mission if you don't know anything about the people on it. That is a question that we hear pretty often. I think that's something that we discussed, Becca, when you all were talking about joining the co-op. And it's something that I think, like I said, is not just discussed pretty often, but is something that is a big flag and a good flag at that. And so if you go to the next slide, you see a little bit of a fun graphic, if you will, that really helps depict this. So essentially, if gooddonor@gmail.com, what we know about them is they just became a sustainer. We know that they always make an end of year gift, and they clicked on 5 out of 5 emails from, your favorite nonprofits last week. We are able to model these individuals just like Good Donor, because we always want good donors on our list, and find people who are most similar to them, ensuring that when an organization is looking to acquire and grow their audience, they're looking at the best people and modeling them and finding people who are just similar to them, like gooddonor@gmail.com, and acquiring those email addresses. So it really is utilizing the behaviors and really ensuring that we're able to find the right people. On this next slide, you can see here a little bit of a way that we are depicting how we do this. I think our data science team would probably cringe if they knew that we were showing it in stars and X's, but here we are. And so what we are able to do is look at the data about your list. So we're able to look at 1 year ago, 1 month ago, 1 week ago, even beyond that as well. And we're able to say, okay, your top donors, which you see as that top section, we're able to see when somebody is donating, whether it be that 1 year ago, a month ago, or 1 week ago. And then we're able to take those patterns and find people who are most similar to them, like I was describing earlier in the digital co-op. And so you can see here, these patterns align very closely with the patterns of your top donors. And so therefore, those are the individuals that you're going to email and acquire from the co-op. And so that's like the most simplified way of describing how we find the right people. Again, our very robust data science team would probably, like I said, cringe at my description, but this, I think, really showcases the best way to find the right individuals at the right moments. And so I think it's also important to look at, nobody should ever acquire individuals from a single source. So really looking at how the digital co-op stacks up against other sources. So we have Facebook and Care2 as some examples. And when looking at, who uses a lookalike audience based on the organization's data, as I just showed you with those stars and X's, we definitely do. As does Facebook. Care2, best I know, does not do that. And so it really does allow for us to find people who are most similar to your donors, ensuring a quick return. The next column here is whether or not the organizations integrate donation data to help identify potential donors. I always joke that Facebook has a lot of data on all of us, myself included. What they don't have is when I'm engaging with email and when and where I'm donating necessarily. And so that's a big one that you can see on the bottom here. The digital co-op does have that data. And in fact, we only allow organizations to acquire email addresses who have been active in the past 30 days. And active there is defined as opened, clicked, or donated, which allows for us to be really certain that we're not harming deliverability, finding people who are email responsive in an email channel. And again, we have that donation data to really help us inform all the modeling. And then you have the cost per name on the far right. Of course, all of the costs are very much in flux at all times. But the digital co-op, the most we charge is $1. Care2, I think it's around $1. And then Facebook, the range is really quite large. $1, I think, up to $10. I think we've even paid a little bit more, Becca, in certain moments. So it's a big range. And so if you are an organization who finds money at the end of a fiscal year or a quarter, or if you are an organization who's more mid-sized, if you can remove the design work and the content work that Becca was showcasing earlier and the management fees and all of that, and just pay for the names, and it's always $1 per name, I think that's something that's really worth, looking into. Since we created the co-op, like I said, that was in 2020, we've had multiple organizations come to us saying, hey, Advantage AI, which is the product where you're able to grow your program with new to list email addresses, worked so well. Are there other things that we can begin to do? And so with organizations that we work really closely with, as they've bubbled up different challenges that they are facing, we've been able to create new products that allow for them to address those challenges. One of them is reactivation, and that is looking at your inactive file. We all know that we have millions of people sitting on our inactive file who were not emailing today. And we're able to say, okay, of the 1 million people that are inactive, here's 100,000 that you should begin to email. We're seeing them be really responsive elsewhere within the co-op. We know they won't harm deliverability. They're already aware of your brand. These are solid names to begin to email. When we do that, reactivation email addresses are around 25 cents per email address. And we have seen organizations break even on that within 13 days sometimes. So that's really an incredible one. And then the other one that I will touch on is mid-level modeling. That is something that is pretty new. Last year end, we had an organization come to us and say, we have a mid-level audience. Can we model it and find people who are most similar? They did just that. They spent $100,000 on email addresses ahead of year end and emailed an audience of 100,000 potential mid-level donors. One of the people received the very first email and called and made a donation of $300,000. I always caveat this to say I cannot promise those results every time. I wish that I could. But you can see based on some of the little case studies that we just talked through, we are able to really use the data to ensure that we're able to drive results for organizations. And it doesn't stop there. We can do advocacy, SMS, custom audiences for Facebook, the list goes on. And so it's really been really fun to watch the overarching digital co-op program and an umbrella product build out new products within it as we've worked with different organizations like Becca to really figure out how are the challenges that they're facing able to be solved with the data and products that we can create. And so I previewed this one a little bit, but I was too excited to wait for the slide. So this is an organization who utilized the digital co-op to grow their email audience and ensure they're able to email the largest audience possible ahead of year end. They acquired the names just ahead of Giving Tuesday, which means, if you email them ahead of Giving Tuesday, then you also have all of December, assuming Giving Tuesday lands in November, which usually it does, to drive additional revenue. So they spent $100,000 and broke even in 13 days. Quick math lands you around December 10th, which means the next 20 or so or 21 days of December, all of that revenue that comes in from this audience was just ahead of the investment they made. So really great moments to really throw down and buy new email addresses or reactivation really are ahead of year end or ahead of big moments.
So at Make-A-Wish, while we did not have the 13-day break even, we joined the co-op in November 2022 and made that acquisition investment right before the end of the year. In January, we had a 64% ROI on these names, and by July, we'd hit 100%. So like Maureen said, there is an upfront investment here, but we found that we have been able to earn this back pretty quickly, which makes it a really easy place to consider future investment. The data has just been so clear to us that this is the right place for us to invest. We've seen so much success actually that we're about to experiment with modeling for some other specific donor groups. And we're going to be testing those in the next couple of months, which is really exciting. The other thing that I think is so great about this is it has just been a really simple thing to implement in terms of manpower at Make-A-Wish. We are a really lean digital team. It's basically me and one other person running our whole program. So having something that is so simple and so easy for us to implement on our end has just been an absolute game changer, and also sort of freed up some bandwidth for us to really hone in on those cultivation and retention strategies that sometimes require a little bit more work on the organization side.
Yeah, and speaking of, the lift to join the co-op, I do think it is quite easy. There are 4 steps, and Becca previewed that a little bit. So first you join the co-op, then you immediately begin to receive new prospects, again, that are modeled after your audience, and you begin to communicate with them. You can email them, you can run ads to them, et cetera. And then we help you measure the ROI. And then of course, like rinse and repeat. So it really is a pretty easy lift. And we try to make sure that the Mission Wire team takes on the biggest lift as far as like tech and modeling and all that kind of fun stuff. So as far as Becca's team, I think you gave us access and paid the invoice and signed the license agreement, and then we just delivered the name. So it really is, when you break up the work to join the co-op, the vast majority, if like 95% or more, falls to the Mission Wire team, really trying to make it as easy as possible for organizations to join. So you've joined, you have the email addresses. What do you do once the names are on your list? So like I said, these new email addresses that you're acquiring are really modeled after the top donors on your list. And so the best thing to do is what has worked well with your top donors. If you can look back to the past 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, I think it's really important to figure out what worked well with your donor audience and then create something like that to put in front of this audience. Now, if you happen to be buying names November 8th, then I would say add them to your stream, knowing that you're probably previewing Giving Tuesday, you're building up to Giving Tuesday and then going right into December. If you're acquiring email addresses, call it January 15th, you might want to build a custom onboarding stream, different from a welcome stream. I don't think that you need to say, hi, welcome to this organization, but rather we know that these individuals are, email responsive and really enjoy to engage. So they're very tactic responsive. And so I think creating an onboarding stream where it really drives engagement and fundraising always works really well. And speaking of, this is just one of the emails that we have sent to the co-op names. Becca, I think we've bought names every month, I think, since you all joined. And so this is just one of the pieces of content that we've created. And you can see here, what we really tried to do was take the experience of what your donation does for somebody who's looking for a wish to be granted and put it into a really fun and simplified and educational design, allowing for somebody to quickly understand, what does Make-A-Wish do? What do they help accomplish? What does my dollar do? And then quickly allow for somebody to say, yes, I want to be a part of this. I'm going to go ahead and donate. So this is just one of the many examples of the content we have created that allows for organizations to, not organizations, allowed for Make-A-Wish to drive a quick return for their audience. And if you go to the next slide, you can see when we implemented this, the click-through rate was above the program average, again, because it's very easy to follow, right? You're reading this entire journey, you're very easily understanding the journey of your dollar, and you're able to click on it and go ahead and quickly make a donation. And also it's a quick snapshot that helps people understand, what does Make-A-Wish do? So it quickly builds the brand affinity as well. This is another example of a case study, again, really leaning heavily on the graphics and the designs. Make-A-Wish in particular has so many great graphics of children, their parents, really showcasing the outcome of granting wishes. And so we really tried to pull those forward as much as possible. So this is a parent-to-parent sign the card, where we're asking people to send comfort to parents enduring the traumatic stress of their child's battle, knowing that most people receiving emails are adults themselves. And so you can see here on this slide, it was asking people to engage, again, really trying to tell the story of what Make-A-Wish does, who they help, and offer supporters a low lift opportunity. I know that Becca previewed how we were using Sign the Card in ads too. And so this is something that works across channels. And then the results here, again, above average click-through rate and open rate, and really strong revenue and donation rate results. So I think this is just a good example of how we've created content that really aligns both with the donors as well as the newly acquired names to drive a really fast return.
And just to add, I think one of the really interesting things that we've found with these co-op names is that the same types of messages that really resonate with our kind of core audience are also resonating with them, which I think just really reinforces for us that we're finding the right people through the co-op.
So this is one of my favorite campaigns. I'm excited that I get to chat through this. So this is an opportunity for us to create a custom user flow, again, that went to both the current audience, the audience acquired through Facebook, as well as the audience acquired through the digital co-op, really ensuring that we're creating these user flows to, again, tell the story, build the relationship, and then end in a donation ask. So you see on the top left here that we have a Sign the Card for Wish Moms as Mother's Day, which worked incredibly well. And when you click into it, it's very easy. It's very stripped down while still telling the story. So we outline, the vital parts of a wish and how important that is in one's life, and then ask for people to sign the card, first name, last name, email address. Though we often already have the email address, people feel, we've tested this a lot, that by adding their email address, they feel like it's more real. And so that's a field that doesn't need to be mandatory, but certainly drives better results. And then we go right into more of like a questionnaire and a survey. And so this is a supporter survey with a midnight deadline saying, thank you so much for signing our Mother's Day card to send comfort to Wish Moms. Will you take another moment to answer questions? And a lot of what we're doing here is priming the audience, building the education, deepening the brand awareness and the understanding with questions that are pretty straightforward and easy. They're not meant to be head scratchers by any means. It really is meant to just deepening and educating. And if you jump to the next slide, you can see a little bit more of this, where again, we're really trying to build the questions that allow for people to understand more about Make-A-Wish, and really trying to focus on, what part of the wish experience is most meaningful to you. And then if you go to the next slide here, we pull all of that information into this slide or into this part of the survey, where we're then saying, fantastic, thank you so much. Now that you know about Make-A-Wish, will you also go on to donate $125? That happens to be their average gift, which is incredibly high for many organizations, but it works well for Make-A-Wish. And then we also have the option of, yes, I'll donate more, which is always a fun option to see if people click on that as well. So this is just an example of what has worked really well, again, with the Make-A-Wish brand. We also have on this next slide, again, just another way to deepen relationships, to preview content, to do really robust storytelling. We had a meet the members of the Wish team. Again, trying to pull back the curtain and allow for people to understand everything that goes into making a wish come true. but also everything that the Make-A-Wish team does. And so this was focused on meeting Abraham, who works in the Hudson Valley, and again is really just trying to do his storytelling and tell his story to the audience. And as you can see here, it ends on a donation ask, and we also have, and sorry, I jumped ahead. We had a meet page, sorry, storyline 2, again, just previewing and telling the story of different members of the Make-A-Wish team, all of which, if you go to the next slide, lands on a donation ask. So again, it's really the same user flow, just repurposed in different ways to tell different stories, but something that we have tested time and time again that continues to work, not just for Make-A-Wish, but for many different brands out there. And so with that, we have made it through the slides, and I'd love to see if there are any questions that you all have. If so, there, I believe, is a Q&A option down on the bottom of the screen where you can click in and add any questions. And again, thank you all for attending. We'll jump into these questions momentarily.